Would you let me give you my story about marble shooting? I was the marble king of Navarre County. You might beat me every once in a while playing ball. You won't beat me shooting marbles. Brother, when I get down and get that marble and I shoot it, when it lands on top of the marble you're supposed to be shooting. I'm a marble shooter, still am. I've played hours and hours and hours. But my mama interfered with my marble playing. She said, son, she said, you like to play marbles? And I said, yes, ma'am, I sure do. And she said, but, you know, you'd never play marbles for keeps, would you? And I said, no, ma'am. But I had a battle going on. She said, you know, that's gambling. When you, of course, to me, it bordered on art and ability, you know. I mean, you know, if I could just outshoot a fella and get his marbles. But she said, no, that's gambling, son. You just don't do it. I said, no, ma'am, I'm not going to do it. Oh, you can't imagine the temptations that I had. And especially when I didn't have any good marbles. I had some old crops. I had an old steel ball or two, Brother Frank, and I had some old beat-up, busted-up marbles, but I want you to know I'd shoot them. Or sometimes them things that looked like a drunk man rolling along, they had so many busts on them, you know, break. And they just, but oh, if I didn't just shoot it straight at the marble, it would never get there. But anyhow, and one day, now this was such a temptation, one day, I was down on the school ground, way down at the end of it, and a big old boy came up. I mean, he was the biggest farmer's son in the community. Mr. Comer. His son was named Frank. And Frank said, Lester, you want to shoot some keeps? I said, yeah, let's do. Man, I reached in and pulled out an old sour marble or two, put them in the ring, and I tell you, I shot as fast and as hard as I could, and I cleaned his plow. I got every marble he had, and I stuck them in my pocket, and he said, Lester, would you stake me one from a taw? Now, you know the taw is the one you shoot with, see. That's an important marble. And, of course, he had agates. He had every color in the rainbow. You've never seen such marbles in your life as he had. Big ones and little ones and red ones. And he had blue ones and he had stars in them. And he had every kind of marble. And I said, yeah. I said, here, take this. I shot it out. I got every marble he had. About that time, the bell rang and somebody hollered, books! That's what they told you when you wanted to come on and get in the books. And boy, we went up there, and I want you to know, my pockets was swinging with marbles. You've never, listen, I was as rich as any country boy ever wanted to be, especially when you didn't want nothing but marbles. And so, I got up there to school, and I went in, and I took them out of my pocket, and my old homemade book sack was on the side of that old-fashioned desk, and I opened up my pocket, and I poured the marbles in my book sack. And I looked, I couldn't think about my books or nothing. I just thought, man, that's enough for the rest of your life. Look at those taws. Look at those agates. Agates, man, you never had an agate in your life. Them old steel balls and crocks, they were embarrassed to be in the same book sack with. And they just poured them down in the book sack. And I hung the book sack down on my old desk, and I stood there. And in a little while, the teacher came and said, Lester, recess, but you must stay in. You can't go out and play. And I said, yes, ma'am. I didn't argue. I didn't start a riot. I didn't sass her. I didn't fight her. I didn't ball up. I didn't pout. I just said, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And so, about the time recess was about half over, which is about 15 or 20 minutes, the door opened. I was the only one in the room, and who was it but Mr. Frank Comer, the man that shot me marbles for keeps, and I took all he had. And he came up to the desk, and he said, Lester, but oh, you know, before he got there, it got awful quiet and nobody around, and yet I thought I heard somebody say, Sonny boy, you're not going to play for keeps, are you? And I said, oh, wait a minute. Ooh. She said, you know, she said, you know, my boy's not a gambler. Lester's not a gambler. She didn't tell me then, but she's praying already that I'd be a preacher someday. And preachers don't gamble. And you're just not going to play marbles for keeps. And I just kept a hearing, seemed like, boy, there's a battle started rolling around, looked like a couple of elephants was fighting a duel on the inside. And I mean, the war was raging, and I sat there and I said, well, you know, I rationalized. I said, well, I won him. He wanted to play. I just outshot him. And I've taken a lot of time for me to learn to shoot like I shoot, and he just couldn't shoot. It's his hard luck. Besides, his daddy got a lot of money. He can get him a tow sack full of marbles, and I ought to be able to keep these. And I looked down in the book sack. I said, oh, me, those are so pretty. And so, but here come Frank up, and he said, Lester, he said, would you loan me a marble for a tow? Oh, listen, that's when the battle came to the climax. That's when the Lord spoke to a little freckle-faced boy's heart. And I reached down and I got that old book sack and I said, would you hold both of your hands? He said, I don't want but one, Lester. I said, I know, but I don't want none of them. And Mama, I think, started smiling at me. And I think she started saying, "Atta boy. That's my boy. That's my little old boy. It's going to be a preacher someday. And he's not going to be a gambler now." He held his hands, and I poured out every marble and picked out them old beat-up marbles of mine and put them in my pocket. Dear friend, I doubt if I've ever been bigger before or since than I was the day that I gave back the marbles to Frank Coleman. Oh, you'd say, well, Brother Roloff, is that all of the story? No, that's not all the story. Many years later, the Lord put His majestic hand on my life and called me to preach. And my daddy and my mama called me and they said, "Son," I was in tent evangelism, and they said, "You know, the First Baptist Church in Dawson voted to have you come preach a meeting, and we'll put your tent up on Main Street in Dawson, Texas." I don't think I even had to pray about it. I said, "I'm a-coming." And we got on Main Street and started a meeting. And old Charlie Rogers put up the tent. And there we were, preaching the meeting. And I looked out and I saw the most dignified, graying young man that you've ever seen. That's Frank. Sitting out there in the audience. And oh, my heart got burdened. I'd prayed for him ever since God called me. I could call the names of my playmates and many, many of them that I prayed for. And have seen many of them saved. And so I got to preaching, and I said, "Lord, it'd be so wonderful to see Frank saved." On Sunday morning, he sat there in a beautiful blue suit, the most immaculate dressed man, I guess, in the tent. And I walked up to him and I said, "Frank, I've been praying for you for a long time, and I want you to give your heart to Christ." And, you know, he just moved right out in the aisle, and he and I walked down to the altar together. And he knelt. And, you know, it just sort of dawned on me. That's worth more than all the marbles in the world. Brother, that's one of the heavenly agates God gave me. And I baptized him that afternoon, and he helped to build a brand new church and was the chairman of the... Listen, dear friends, I'm just trying to tell you this. It pays to live right.